Hello everyone, welcome to another card crafting video. Today I'm going to be mixing and matching a bunch of the Spellbinders club kits. So let me show you a few of them that I'm going to be working with. This one is the Clear Stamp and Die of the Month club kit. I love this one. I think this is a must-have for your stash. It's called Sending Sentiments. You can get this without the coordinating dies. For this one, I would highly recommend getting the dies to go with it. Next up, I have the Better Press Club, and this one is called Sentimental Mosaic. It's a big background panel, and it includes 3 sentiment stamps. And then I have the stitching die of the month for November. This one's called Grand Stitched Blossoms, and there are some really huge flowers in this set. Not all of them are stitching dies, just a few, so it looks overwhelming when it comes to stitching, but you don't stitch all of these. And then I have the 3D embossing folder, and this one is called Crisscross Motif. I also have the wax seal of the month. I forgot to show it at the beginning, but I will show that a little bit later. I'm also going to be using some Spellbinders watercolor cardstock. The size of this is 8.5 by 11. You get 10 sheets, and it is 110-pound watercolor cardstock. Let me just open this using my all-in-one tool. I'll give you a closer look. On one side, it's textured. It has some beautiful texture, but it's really difficult to see on camera. Let me try and hold it up close. See if you can see the texture on this. I love watercolor cardstock with a bit of texture. On the flip side, it is smooth. So I'm excited to try this. I haven't ever tried this before. Kind of a creamy off-white watercolor cardstock. All right, so let's get into the first card. I'm going to be creating a bunch of cards in today's video. I'll go for the stitching die of the month club first. I'm going to cut out all of my pieces. Some of them I'm going to be cutting out more than once, and I'll use the watercolor cardstock. Here they all are cut out. And I'm going to pull out my watercolors and paint these. This does go a lot faster than cutting out each die with a different piece or different color of cardstock. And it was just fun to sit and paint. So this big floral is going to be kind of a pink fuchsia. I'm going to speed this up a bit. I'm just bringing the paint straight from the pan. I'm not mixing any of the colors. I'm going to paint this whole flower this color. I'm not worried about it looking smooth. I want it to look painterly or like a watercolor has been added to this. And then I do come back in with another layer after this dries. But you can see how it's not perfectly smooth, and that's what I'm going for. Next, I want to paint this smaller piece gray, so I'm just using some black watercolor and watering it down so it looks gray. I'll add another layer to that as well. And now for some gold watercolors. I've had this little set in my stash for ages. I love it because you have many different options of gold. The greenery, I'm putting down a light green first, then I'll drop in a little bit of a blue-green watercolor. Paint the leaves. Then I'm going to go back and add another layer to the gray. I want it just a little bit darker. The brush I'm using has water in the barrel. These are great when you don't have a sink nearby. And now I'm adding more fuchsia on top of blossom, a little bit darker this time. And I'm going to allow these to dry. I will be doing all of my stitching off camera. Just very basic stitching. Again, there's only a few pieces that require stitching, if you even want to stitch at all. I'm using another piece of the watercolor cardstock to stamp my sentiment onto, and I haven't ever used the happy stamp in this set yet, so I do have to stamp it out several times. This time I'm not cutting out how many times I stamp it, just speeding it up so you can see how many times I actually stamp it out on this textured watercolor paper. Here we go. I'll take this out of my mini MISTI. And then I can start adding my blossom to it, I do decide to come in with more gold paint. I'm adding some gold dots over the cutout dots on this blossom. Just fun little details that make cards really special. I'm using the darkest color of gold in this set. It's called yellow gold. Then I can set this aside to dry. And then I can start adding my flower to the watercolor cardstock panel. I'll put down this big fuchsia blossom first. This is going to be kind of dimensional because this watercolor cardstock is very thick. You can build your flowers with this set any way you'd like. I don't think I'm building it according to how they build it on the Spellbinders website, but it's fun because you can mix and match these pieces however you'd like. Next, I'll glue down some pink petals that I stitched with some gray embroidery floss. And then last, I can glue down the stem piece. With this heavyweight watercolor cardstock, I don't mind using the liquid glue. It's just the lightweight pattern paper that I don't like using liquid glue with because I'm afraid that it will, I don't know, break through the paper or show through the paper. I'm going to hold this down. It took me a while to allow this to dry. For the leaves, I stitched them with some gold embroidery floss. And these leaves fit the base leaf perfectly. And I was just fixing those a little bit. I guess it really doesn't matter, but I just wanted them to match up perfectly. And for a last fun touch, I'm going to gild the edges of this panel. I'm using more of the gold watercolors, and I didn't add much water. I want this to go down really thick. I'm just kind of swiping my brush along the edges. It's not going to be perfect, but it'll look really pretty. At the end of this video, after I finish playing with all of the club kits that Spellbinders sent me, I'm going to tell you which one of all of these is my favorite. Because I definitely have a favorite. I mean, all of them are fabulous, but one just stands out. So I'll let you know at the end of this video. Okay, I'll allow that to air dry. And then I can add it to a white card base. And my card base isn't made from the watercolor paper. It's just a white cardstock, but I didn't want to waste any of the watercolor cardstock. Here it is, all done. Let me give you a close-up look at this. You can see the gilt edges. I think that's so pretty. I have more leftover pieces from this set that I die cut. I'm going to make another card. I'm using a piece of lunar gray cardstock. I'm going to spatter it with some dark gold. Just using the same watercolor brush that I used to paint everything. And I have to flick it a few times to cover this panel. The box I'm using is just an old box, and it protects my monitor, which is right in front of my craft mat. Next, I'll use some of the silver, or it's called white gold watercolor, to add some silver tones to it. And then I put that aside to dry. I cut it out with a notched die, and my leftover flower pieces are going to go right on top of this panel. So I'll put together the flower. I used some embroidery floss on this piece that matched closely to the velvet rose cardstock that I'm using behind my notched panel. And again, I stitched the leaves with more of the gold embroidery floss. I didn't want these pieces to go to waste, and it was so much fun creating the first card that I wanted to try another one. And then this little piece I'm going to put up at the top. It's cut out with the velvet rose cardstock as well. This is going to help it stand out a little bit from the gray background. Now I can adhere this panel onto the Velvet Rose cardstock. I did center it, but later I come back and peel it up and put it more up at the top so I can put a sentiment at the bottom. Let's go ahead and attach the flower. Again, using some liquid glue to do this. It's just perfectly on this notched edge die. And now you see that I shifted the gray panel up so I could stamp a sentiment on the Velvet Rose cardstock. This is going to say, "Sending the warmest thanks." This will be a really fun sentiment to use for winter cards. I'll attach it to a white card base. Now I can add the cute sending sentiment. I love how those dies cut out these big words. I'll glue that right over the stem of the flower. And here is a close-up look at card number 2. There's lots of fun little details to these cards. I just love that gold spatter. For card number 3, I'm going to use another piece of the Lunar Gray cardstock, and I'm wetting it down so that I can emboss this in the 3D embossing folder. Again, this embossing folder is called Crisscross Motif, and I wet it down so that it won't crack when I run it through my Platinum 6. Here it is embossed. Let me give you a close-up look. This folder just tickles my fancy. I really love this one. I think this is one you can use all year round. To bring out the flowers, I'm going to use some pigment ink. This is called Unicorn White from Hero Arts. And look how pretty that is on top of this embossed panel. I'm going to add even more ink to this. I have a little cube of silver ink. I'm going to go right over the white with this. And it adds a beautiful metallic look to this panel. This is one of those cards that you make that you're not quite sure where you're going to go with it, but you're having a lot of fun in the process. So you see a gold embossed sentiment there at the top. I don't end up using that or the frame that you see to the right. To finish off this card, I'm using an older set of dies. This one's called Mini Blooms and Sprigs to add some floral pieces to this embossed panel. I wanted some flowers that looked like the flowers that were embossed. And this is the closest thing that I could find, although a lot of my dies are in storage still. So I just made do with this, but it turns out really pretty. I'll glue this panel onto my white card base, and then I'll glue the frame. I cut this out with Wild Berry. I'm really loving these notched corner dies. I embossed both of my sentiments with some white embossing powder onto more of the Lunar Gray cardstock. This sentiment is going to say, "You are adored." Then I'll adhere the You sentiment of the strip sentiment. And this clear stamp and die of the month club comes with a strip die to cut out all of the smaller dies. I love that. Now I can glue down the florals. I cut these out with more of the Wild Berry cardstock as well as some white cardstock. For the centers of these flowers, I'm going to put some white gems. And then I do end up adding one more flower and putting it down just under the sentiment. I love how these white gems look in these flowers. And as you see, there's one more under the sentiment. And that's all I'm doing to this card. Let me give you a really close-up look. Those embossed flowers are just lovely. I added a few more gems around the panel as well. Now let's try out the Better Press for November. Again, this one's called Sentimental Mosaic. Pulled out my Better Press system, And I'm going to center this plate right in the middle. The paper I'm going to be using for this is the porcelain cardstock. Tape that to the door with a little bit of yellow tape. I'm putting the tape behind it, actually. And the color I'm going to use is one that I've not used before. This one is called Strawberry. This is a very close match to Spellbinders Dahlia Pink cardstock, which I'm going to be using for this card as well. When I put the ink down, I like to go over it at least 3 times. So let me speed this up here for you. Look how pretty that looks on the plate. Oh, goodness. Here's the second time. And one more time for good luck. Put the door on it. And I'll take this off camera and run it through my Platinum 6. So let's see how this turned out. And immediately I am just stunned with how pretty it is. Let me give you a close-up look. I was going to cut this panel and mat it with some of the Dahlia cardstock, but I couldn't even bring myself to cut this down. It was just gorgeous. So let's work on the sentiment. I'm using one of the 3 sentiments that came with this, and I'll press it into some Dahlia Pink cardstock. I used black ink on this, and it simply says, "Hello there." And then I can cut it out with a circle die. I'm going to center this in the middle of the card. But first, I am going to pop it up with some foam squares. Actually, I'm going to add it to my card base first. I want to create more cards using this Better Press plate, but using different colors because it is so stunning. I'll center the sentiment in the middle of this card. This looks just beautiful as is, but I am going to add a little more to this card. I pulled out my Envelope of Wonder die set. I'm going to use some of the leaves from this set. There's this little die at the top right, and it cuts out a couple different leaf shapes. I'm just going to tuck these under the sentiment, gluing them down flat. I'm using some more Dahlia Pink, some porcelain white, and some mahogany red cardstock. I'll put a few at the top, to the top left. Then I do come in and add a few more leaves at the bottom, as well as some gems. I believe these are the Spectrum gems. I'll link everything in the description box in case you're interested in knowing what I used. But look at the detail on that. It's just beautiful. And I did decorate the inside. I used the Essential 4-Petal label dies and some more leaves. Okay, now for my next card. This is where I'm going to show you the wax seal of the month for November. They always come with some wax beads, and this one is called Bloomy for You. Let me open this up and I'll give you a close-up look at the seal. Just using my pen knife. This up is a little sticker at the side. And then this has some pretty flowers on it and a sentiment that says "For You." Let's try this out with some of these lilac, or they're called pastel lilac wax beads. I haven't used this color yet. I'm also going to be using the Better Press plate again, but this time I'm going to ink it up with some Tuscan ink. I'm using some complementary colors to create this card, the purple and the yellow. This time I am going to force myself to cut this panel down just a little bit. I'm using more of the porcelain cardstock to stamp this on, but I'm going to use some purple mist cardstock to use as a mat behind it. Let's run this through the Platinum 6 and see how this turns out. And again, it's just stunning. Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to create a whole set of cards using different colors of ink with this plate. And now for a little wax seal fun. I use 5 wax beads to begin with. I'll speed this up so you can see it melt. It's kind of fun to watch it melt. And then I'll give it a stir with my all-in-one tool. It's such a pretty light purple color. And that's good and melty. I'll pour it onto the silicone mat. I keep the spoon really close to the mat so it doesn't have time to cool off. And then I'm going to guide wax seal into the hot wax and allow that to sit for about a minute. And this is what it looks like when it's all done. Isn't that pretty with the flowers and the sentiment? I'm pulling in one of my favorite club kits. This one was from January of 2023. It's called Club Blooms. But first, I'm going to attach some of the purple cardstock, the purple mist cardstock, onto my card base. And now for my better pressed panel. And then let's decorate this card. I cut out one of the larger floral pieces with some orange cardstock, and I'll center that. And then right on top of this, I'm going to put my wax seal. I use one of these fabulous wax seal stickers. I'll attach this to the back of the wax seal. Then I can just peel off the backing. And this is going to keep it in place very nicely. I did add some gold paint pen over the top of this wax seal. I don't often show this on camera because I have to get really close up look and go very slowly and carefully with it so I don't get gobs of ink inside my seal. Now I can attach a few smaller florals using more of the purple mist. The centers are going to be more of the kind of the orangey yellow cardstock. I find my pickup tool. Here we go. Center that inside the small flower. I added a few gold gems, and here is a close-up look at my last card. Okay, so now to let you know which of my club kits is my favorite this month, which was really hard to do because they're all beautiful, but it is the Better Press club kit, again called Sentimental Mosaic. It was just amazing to look at the results after I pulled that out of the Better Press system. I had to sit there and stare at it for a minute. It was so gorgeous. And of course, you get that texture pressed into the paper as well. So what a fabulous month this has been for the club kits from Spellbinders. Check out the description box if you want to see links to these products. And I hope you were inspired. This was a really fun video for me to put together. Thanks for watching, everyone. Take care.